Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics newsletter, here as always with Vince Martin from Wall Street and Maine. Vince, a very busy week in politics again, wasn't it?
It was, but actually looking at it, it was a busy week, but kind of an odd week in terms of the major events. I don't think that much happened. In the U.S., we have Iran, we have the tariff decision at the Supreme Court and the State of the Union, of course. They're all seemingly pretty big events, but I'm not sure any have real practical impact.
That's a great way to open the podcast, Vince. We're going to talk about things that don't matter on the large, but we are where we are.
Stay tuned, everybody. Well, no, I'm trying to signal that we're not going to spend that much time on these things just because it does seem like you're supposed to. If listeners want that, they can tune in to Path to Power America tomorrow. There are still mad at them.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting aspects of what happened, but we don't need to pretend that this week drove some massive sea change in American politics. And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about news that got obscured by these big events that I think is a lot more interesting.
We had the State of the Union this week, didn't we, Vincent, in the United States? And Donald Trump has mastered that elusive art that all politicians seek to master, and that's saying a lot without actually saying anything at all.
It was impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, he spoke for 100 and something minutes without actually really saying anything.
Yeah, I think it was 108, if I'm remembering correctly, the longest State of the Union speech in American history.
And comparing that, what was the shortest?
The shortest, I think, was Nixon. Nixon did like 28 or 29 minutes in the 1970s. The fun comparison people have done to Trump for a long time when he goes on these stem winders, as we call them in the States, is that the Gettysburg Address was 272 words. It's like 90 seconds if you read it out loud, sometimes quality over quantity. But yeah, it was, the longest ever. And I think you're right. To my point up front, I don't think he said a single thing that was really notable.
No, he spoke about Iran. He spoke about the economy. He spoke a lot about the economy, and he was fact-checked on that a lot.
He always is, yeah. It was a typical Trump speech, right? He speaks for an hour and a half. He tells 40 lies and 20 exaggerations, and everybody gets on with their life.
But he did get one fact right. And I thought this was actually quite significant. He claimed that the murder rate in the United States is the lowest in, 125 years or something to that effect. And he was correct.
Yep. Yeah, that low crime rate, I think, is really fascinating. That it's not just murder rate, all sorts of crime are down, which is a really interesting statistic, I think, for two reasons. Number one, nobody really can take credit for it. Like, obviously, Trump is doing so because the rate has come down since he took office, but it also started falling pretty sharply in the last 2 years of the Biden presidency. So there is like this weird thing where that's a pretty huge societal accomplishment to have crime rates at the rates that we have them. Yet we don't really have an answer as to why precisely that's happening. People float the end of lead paint in the 1970s. There's a somewhat dark theory that Roe v. Wade in 1973, which legalized abortion, was a factor. There's all sorts of theories that are a big debate, but it is seemingly a massive societal accomplishment where no one can really point to take credit. And the other point is, which I think is funny, is you said, I had to go fact check it. I think most Americans probably had the same thought. Crime is a weird thing here that if you tell people, particularly older people, that crime is at an all-time low, they literally won't believe you. They'll say, no, when I was a kid, we didn't lock our doors and we went into the city all the time and it was safe. And now these places are terrible. Like, nope, it's safer than it was in the 1950s, particularly people over 70 will just not believe you when you say that at all.
Yeah, of course. We have statistics as well in Ireland about crime this week. And it's down here also, but if you switch on the internet or switch on the news, you switch anything on at all, you switch on the lights, the lights will probably tell you the crime rate is going up.
Yeah.
But the statistics say otherwise. So there's a bit of cognitive dissonance going on here between what's really happening and what's being reported, I think. It's particularly, and I'll blame social media as usual for this, social media amplifying all kinds of crimes that we normally wouldn't have come across before. Can I ask you something? Is it normal for members of Congress and the houses of Congress to be thrown out of a Trump speech or any kind of speech that the president is giving?
No, not really. I think that the two things that are going to be remembered from the speech, not anything that Trump said, but what Democrats did. The first one is the Democrats not standing when Trump asked them to stand if they, quote, agreed that the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. The Washington Post actually had an article out on Thursday morning with Republicans taking a victory lap over how smart they were for setting a trap for the Democrats on that one. And then the other one is Trump getting heckled by Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. As Trump was discussing immigration, Omar actually yelled out, "You have killed Americans," over and over and over again.
Yeah, I thought that a little bit darkly ironic from Trump, asking them to stand. If they agreed it was the first duty of the American government to protect American citizens because his government has been shooting citizens dead on the street.
Yeah.
There's no kind of, look, sometimes we're the bad guys also, which no president is going to admit to anyway. But, from the outside looking in, we're kind of thinking, Trump's ICE people have been shooting people dead on the street.
Yeah.
And he's looking to claim credit for protecting people.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But politically, as you said, I mean, no president is going to, especially in a State of the Union, is going to go up there and equivocate or take responsibility. It's supposed to be the talking points of the president and his party. So, yeah, it is ironic, but absolutely not terribly surprising. The heckling is a little bit different, though.
That first started under Obama, didn't it? The Republicans heckling him.
I don't want to say it started in the sense it was a trend, but yeah, I think the first time that I remember it happened in 2009. Obama was giving a speech to Congress. Wasn't a State of the Union. It was about his health care plan. And there was a Republican representative named Joe Wilson who famously yelled out, "You lie," when Obama was making a point. It's kind of interesting looking back at that, how much things have changed. Even Republicans criticized Wilson pretty quickly and pretty sharply. And Wilson came out and apologized. Obama quickly accepted the apology, said, hey, things get heated. He gave a sincere apology. We should move on. 17 years later, that is not how this is going to play out. I don't think any of our listeners need to follow Trump on Truth Social or Omar on social media and see how they're going to respond. I think Trump is already attacking the two of them viciously over and over again. Either him or his staffer who writes his post and puts out racist memes. One of the two is doing it. But now, to be clear, I don't want to play everything was great before Trump showed up game, because Wilson did apologize, and then the Democrats insisted he apologize on the floor of the House, and he wouldn't, and he got a formal reprimand, and it was this whole big thing. So this stuff is still going on. And there is a funny aside about Wilson, because when I saw that heckling, he was the first guy I thought of, and I was like, I can make a joke on the pod about how he served 2 terms in Congress, and he's remembered for heckling Obama and getting a post office renamed, because he's never accomplished anything when he was in there. And I looked him up. He's still in the House of Representatives. I had no idea. No, he's been in there for 25 years. I follow politics closely. I had no idea. I reached out to a close friend who's worked in politics at the state level. I was like, "Hey, did you know Joe Wilson's still in the House?" He goes, "What? No, that's amazing." So we can still make the joke. So it's just he served 13 terms, and he will be remembered for heckling Obama and renaming a post office.
Yes, I mean, look, we have politicians in Ireland that have been in Dáil Éireann for 20, 25 years also. And, if they walked past you on the street, you wouldn't know them.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Unless they introduce themselves. And being politicians and being Irish politicians, they almost certainly will introduce themselves. So.
Whether you want them to or not, right?
Exactly, yeah. Politicians in Ireland, they have to be seen to get up early in the morning. And if they can get up early in the morning, well, then they can go back to bed for the rest of the day. So
right.
That's all they have to do.
We should give Wilson a little bit of credit, though, since we're picking on him a bit, because we talked in the last episode about the military, about the sense that American elites and politicians make decisions to go to war and their kids don't go. Wilson actually has 4 sons. All 4 have served in the military, and 3 did tours in Iraq or Afghanistan. So some credit where credit is due there. But in terms of like kind of that heckling, I did want to ask a question that you might have a better sense of. Here, that's the first time that happened in 17 years pretty much. So it seems like an anomaly. Don't they kind of do that in Britain in the House of Commons? Aren't they kind of yelling at each other on the floor all the time? Well, the Prime Minister's questions or whatever it is.
Yes, Vince, that does happen in Ireland, and it does happen in the UK, but it's not the same as the State of the Union, though. Yes, there's a lot of heckling, there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it can be quite vicious and quite rowdy, resembling something out of a zoo or a pub at closing time. And it's funny you should bring it up, okay? So the vice chair of the House, a fella called John McGuinness, apologised to a group of school children this morning for the scenes that they witnessed in Dáil Éireann in the Irish Parliament today. The scenes were so rowdy, so
my
terrible,
goodness,
so awful. So he says to the students, he says, I apologise for these people's behaviour. We wouldn't tolerate it in the classroom, he says. And he asks them this. He says, I have some homework for you. So as you can imagine, all the students are sitting down puzzled. We're getting homework when we're meant to have a day off from homework. And he said,
right,
would you mind writing in to me and telling me what you actually thought you saw today? And he's the equivalent to the Speaker of the House in the United States. Can you imagine the Speaker of the House in the United States giving children homework, telling them how awful are these scenes that you just witnessed? So, to your question about heckling happens a lot in Ireland.
Wow.
And there's a lot of heckling, there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of roaring in accents unintelligible to most people outside of Ireland. And for a lot of people inside of Ireland also. Yes, it's a common feature in Irish politics.
Our recording platform has an AI machine that creates a transcript, and it struggles with you.
It struggles with me a lot. Listen, kids struggle with me, the neighbours struggle with me, everybody struggles with me and my accent, in fairness. It's not confined to AI, but I do not believe in the hype of AI until it can do a West Cork accent.
It's pretty much useless until it reaches that point. I think that's fair.
Yes, that's going to be the high point of AI, I can assure you. Never mind all these Claude bots, cloning themselves and, wiping your emails and, crashing the Mexico economy, this kind of thing. Unless it can do the Cork accent, that's going to be its nadir. That's going to be its zenith.
Yeah, we're swapping out the Turing Test for the Clonakilty Test.
That's exactly it. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to wrap up the State of the Union here because I said we didn't want to talk about it. We're now at about 12 minutes in, although, to be fair, I think like 3 of those minutes are actually about the speech. But I do want to return to that idea that the speech, what Trump said didn't matter, but what the Democrats didn't matter. And the Republicans crowing about setting a trap for the Democrats, making them sit or stand for that line about Americans versus illegal aliens. It was smart politically. But the key reason it's smart is because the Democrats are just so disorganized. Correct me if you disagree, because this is really your turf that I'm treading on. But Trump's approval ratings are at the lows. They're heading lower into the speech. We know this. We know he's not going to give some speech with some innovative policy on healthcare or affordability. He's been promising a healthcare plan literally for 12 years. It's not showing up. So if you're on the left, he's going to ramble. If he just talks, the media's going to cover the speech with the fact checks and, no, Trump lied about this and blah, 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 blah. So don't you just give him the rope to hang himself? Just sit there, be quiet, stand up for that thing so you're not giving all his representatives a nice sound bite for campaign ads in October. If the coverage after the speech focuses on Trump, that's a win for the Democrats. If the coverage on the speech focuses on Democrats, that's a loss for them. And particularly for the center and the right, I think the coverage is going to be focusing on the Democrats.
If I was a Democrat strategist, and I put a lot of thought into it, because they're in a terrible position. They're caught between their left side and they're caught on their right side. They're caught in the center. They're kind of surrounded by ideologies and don't know which one to lean into to get them elected and get them over the line.
That's absolutely true, yeah.
I would have boycotted it, and I would have had 4 or 5 or big hitters. I would have had Gavin Newsom, AOC maybe.
Yeah, Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, I think is a
Shapiro, maybe
guy.
3 or 4 Democrats give a 20-minute speech each, outside on the steps, and would have dealt with Trump that way. Because once you see the floor to him, and once you give him that arena, and once you give him that altar to preach from, it's very hard to take it back from him. There was no winning there. I mean, he had the ice hockey team out as well, and that was kind of crass. I was like, good grief.
Oh, come on now. We loved it.
Yeah,
I actually
game of hockey, in fairness.
Yeah. I think the fact that team got politicized is just one of the things that's just so draining in America right now. And again, the Democrats just keep stepping into it. Don't. The average person who's going to be a swing voter in November, they just want to root for their American hockey team and be happy they won. The fact that it's getting politicized because Trump made a dumb joke. Yeah, Trump makes jokes. Like, can we just not take the bait? But yeah, I get your point. It is a tough spot that they're in. But at the same time, it's, 11 years now. They still just have no plan to deal with Trump. They just have no organized strategy. They just have never found a way to push back. And to your point, they're surrounded by ideologies. They've just got to stop with this idea that they're going to make their base happy. Their base is not winning them elections. No. Their base is not giving them control of the House. And if you're Elon or Mar and you really care about immigrants, what the most effective thing that you can do on Tuesday night is just be quiet. You're a lightning rod. You're far left. You're not helping your party by pulling that stuff. You are turning off people in the middle. And the Democrats just keep finding ways to turn off people in the middle. So does MAGA, of course. So, we've talked about this before, particularly at presidential level. The last 3 elections have been decided by people choosing which candidate they dislike least. And the Democrats would probably do well just to let Trump hang himself. He's got all the rope he needs. Just stay out of the way would be my argument.
When you're saying there, Vince, that the Democrats are giving grist to the mill for Trump and his MAGA loons. If I was in the Democrats' position there, I would also feel it quite hard to stay quiet in the chamber with Trump,
especially for an hour and 50 minutes. It's not like you only have to hold on for 30 minutes.
I would find it very hard to stay quiet in the face of his disdain for democracy, his rampant corruption. As a European, as an Irishman, with my hands in my pockets, looking in from the outside, I just don't understand why he hasn't. I do understand why he hasn't been arrested, because, the states, the institutions of state are enthralled to him. But the man should be behind bars.
We're going to get to that sense a little later. I understand your emotional point. And yeah, absolutely. For Democrats, it's hard. But that's the job. They have gone so far away over the last 20 years from the idea that the job is to win elections.
Yeah.
And that's why they ran Hillary in 2016. At the end of the day, that is your freaking job right now. A lot of people have made this point. You can't sit there and say that Trump is a threat to democracy and then not focus on winning elections. Like you can't say, he's a threat to democracy and then say we need to act where our morals and our emotions are important. If he's that big a threat, then no. Then the only thing that matters for Ilhan Omar, I'm sure she felt better about doing it. I'm sure she scored some points. It probably raises her profile with her base. If she doesn't understand that hurt her party, that hurt the goals that she says that she's trying to profess, then she's just an abject moron. I'm sorry. It's just that obvious. You can't be that person in this country. Honestly, for a lot of people who are in the middle, it's distasteful to them that someone in a headscarf is heckling President of the United States. That's not right. That's morally wrong. That's not what we're talking about here. And the fact of the matter is you have to at least at some point have that understanding. The Democrats just refuse to do that. They refuse to put practical election winning over these moralistic outbursts. And all that happens with the moralistic outbursts is people in the middle just go, both these people suck.
Yeah. And then they vote for the person they dislike the least, or who will hurt their pocket the least.
Yeah.
So Vince, if there's any Democrats listening, I'll come over and run the show for you if you want. I'll do it for half the price of those overpriced consultants in New York and California, and I will make sure you will win some elections.
Given that Harris spent $2 billion on her campaign, I think even half of what they spent, you're going to be sitting pretty. Yeah.
I would have done it for a case of whiskey and a box of cigars, Vince.
Yeah, that's true.
And she still would have been elected. They could have saved themselves $2 billion there.
Yeah, it's all so easy when you're in front of a microphone.
Yes.
All right. So we are almost 20 minutes in, of course, on a topic that I said didn't matter, although in our defense, like 2 minutes of that was actually about the State of the Union. So we said up front that major events weren't that impactful, but there were a couple stories that jumped out as kind of flying under the radar. And we'll start with the cross-border story that you flagged about a potential change at the U.S. Internal Revenue Service.
Your lead-ins just keep getting better and better. We went from talking to things that don't matter to we're going to talk about the intricacies of U.S. tax policy. Now, our 6 or 7 listeners are now down to 2 or 3, and that's probably, that's probably the 2 partners, the wives, the kids, whatever.
But the
So
story is at least important, right? I mean, it's potentially important for Ireland, even though it's kind of set in America, so to speak.
yes, so the long and short of it for our listeners is the IRS auditors in the United States have been rifling through Meta's books, that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp,
Right.
looking to find out how they're conning the American taxpayer out of money by putting their money essentially into Ireland. Okay.
Yeah.
In December, Meta sued the IRS in the US tax court. And now, Vince, can you tell me a bit about the US tax court? Is that something completely different to your criminal court? What is that?
Yeah, it's a separate system. As the name suggests, they focus solely on tax issues, which is smart because our tax code is so incredibly, incredibly complicated and has so many gray areas. So
Can they punish you for being a bad guy? Can they send you to jail for not paying your tax?
no. If you're charged with tax evasion, that case takes place in a typical criminal court. The tax court is a civil court, which basically just manages penalties. In this case, the IRS and Meta have been battling for some time, essentially over how much tax Meta is supposed to pay.
So the long and short of it is that companies like Microsoft, Meta, take your pick of social media companies, they moved their rights offshore into Ireland. And it's something known as the double Irish, which I'm not going to get into. It's not a double shot of Irish whiskey or something like that. It's a tax loophole, essentially, that Ireland has been closing and then we're phasing out. This is not pocket money. Okay.
No.
It's a $16 billion claim alleging the company is basically what you call in the United States lowballing its intellectual property.
Right.
And they're transferring it to Ireland, essentially.
Yeah.
And the IRS is looking for $16 billion in tax back and some penalties. So the penalties would probably be another $16 billion.
There have been studies that suggest that if the IRS applied this guidance to the big tech companies with heavy Dublin presences who use this double Irish strategy, that the incremental liability would be several $100 billion across all the companies. We kind of joked up front, who cares about the arcane nature of the United States Internal Revenue Service? This is real money, potentially.
This is problematic for Ireland, Vince. Do you know why?
Why is that?
Because it's coming up to St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And these op-eds and these articles are popping up in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times. They're popping up everywhere. Ireland's a tax haven.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up now is because, Trump is going to be looking at this and his minions are going to be saying, look at Ireland, they're robbing us again.
Yeah.
And it could make the White House very, very awkward once again for Micheál Martin, our Prime Minister, on Taoiseach.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes you nervous about Trump. He very famously believes kind of the last person who talks to him, and he also just sort of fixates on these weird things. It's like in the State of the Union, he said that tariffs would replace the income tax eventually, which is just absolutely delusional.
Yes.
But there's been a few people have noted, people who are formerly in his circle, that somebody told him, like in 1913, which is true, the federal government was funded by tariffs, and he just thinks that's a great idea. So now he thinks that we can do it again. Never mind the fact that the federal government of 1913 and 2026 are just dramatically different things. You do worry that if the right person tells him the wrong thing about Ireland on the right day, that it could become a little bit of a cause for him in a way that it hasn't been yet.
I was struck by this actually watching the State of the Union, that the Supreme Court show up to the State of the Union, Vince. I saw them in their robes like priests,
Yes.
high priests of the American legal system. That's exactly what they are, isn't it? And he must have been looking at them and thinking to themselves, those traitors that, against my tariffs. And Europe's at the moment is kind of like, we made a deal, you should stick to the damn deal. We don't care what kind of political predicament you're in.
I wrote about the tariffs this week. That's another seemingly huge news event. In fact, the Supreme Court ruled against them. I'm not really sure what the practical impact is. He's already saying he's putting in new tariffs. He said that there's a 10% global tariff. Then he said, actually, it's 15%. The administration is still saying it's 10% because evidently no one really knows what allows him to make it 15%. We have absolutely no idea what's going on. There's nothing definitive about these tariffs being struck down. They're just going to find other ways to do it. There are lawyers in the White House right now searching through the law books. They're going to try and find some law from 1887 that they can say reasonably allows him to put on tariffs at his discretion, and it's going to wind up in the courts again. So I sympathize with Europe on this simply from a practical standpoint. Believe it or not, there's actually more confusion now than there was a week and a half ago.
Yes, and Europe is essentially saying, we made a deal, we shook hands on it, stick to the deal, we don't care how uncomfortable it makes Trump at the moment. I don't know, can we extrapolate anything meaningful from it, because we just don't know what's going to happen?
I think that the economic impact now actually is a lot riskier than it was when he announced those tariffs in April. I think I've made this point here before, but like his side has actually been proved reasonably right on the tariffs. There are experts coming out saying the shelves are going to be empty for Christmas, and the world economy was going to collapse, and inflation was going to be double digits. Our economy is still in pretty good shape, not quite as good a shape as Trump was saying it was on Tuesday night, as always, but the worst case scenario hasn't played out. What I think is worrisome now for the U.S., and when the U.S. sneezes, the world catches a cold economically, there's actually more uncertainty. And it's going to be really hard for people to make big investments outside of AI. If you're the CEO of a company looking to invest in America right now, you literally need a team of lawyers to talk you through what authorities Trump might have. Then you need a team of political analysts to tell you, okay, here's what the lawyers say, here's what he might do. And then you need a team of economists to tell you the actual impact on your bottom line in all these scenarios. There's just a real worry at this point that everything just freezes.
The uncertainty will obviously lead to, poor economic output, and that's going to make the American economy worse. The European economies, I'm not an economist, but it seems to be ticking along quite nicely despite all the chaos. But in the United States, it seems like there's real problems going on there underlying because of uncertainty around his economic policies.
We have what's called a K-shaped economy right now, which is basically the people at the top are doing great and the people from the middle on down are struggling with affordability is kind of the big buzzword, even though Trump keeps dismissing that. To me, your worry there, particularly in his second term, is that if the economy starts to slow, what's his response going to be? His response is probably not going to be to back down.
No.
And I'll go, maybe the tariffs are a bad idea. Now, maybe somebody talks him into that. He has backed off of certain tariffs for inflationary reasons very quietly over the past year. But your worry is that he just doubles down on all this if the economy starts to turn, which, could make it worse. So there is something to keep an eye on. But again, like before and after the Supreme Court decision, it's kind of the same sense. There's still a trade war, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and it's still really hard to war game with how exactly this is going to play out.
And nobody knows. You could be subscribed to the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, take your pick of financial Bibles, and nobody can give you a straight answer there either, can they?
And I mean, honestly, Trump himself can't. And I don't mean that as a shot at him. He doesn't even know all he needs to know to decide what he needs to decide. And speaking of he doesn't even know, we can hit Iran too. Got a brief mention in the State of the Union. Trump says he wants diplomacy. Any news in Europe? Any change in perception there? Or are you guys just waiting alongside us on that one?
We are looking at Flight Radar that tracks all those planes all over the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And everybody's just looking at them going, where are these planes going? And they all seem to be going to the Middle East.
Yeah.
I saw a statistic the other day on the Financial Times, I think it was, that there's never been such a large movement of military equipment and it's not been used.
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to be used. It's a matter of when, I think. And I don't have any great insights there into that, but there's an awful lot of stuff just flying across Europe and making its way to the Middle East from the United States. So,
since the State of the Union, we had a lot of people in America making the point that you had already made on this pod on Friday, that Trump has alternately said last year that the nuclear program was obliterated, and then is saying this year we potentially need to go to war to stop the nuclear program.
This was something that caught my eye as well, that went very underreported. We're reporting a lot of things that are going underreported, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have big headlines, so yeah, it's not surprising.
So some guy was shot trying to get into Mar-a-Lago. He was shot dead? Trying to break into Mar-a-Lago last week?
Yeah, I think it was technically like 1:30 on Sunday morning down in Florida, yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah, a 21-year-old man from North Carolina named Austin Tucker Martin, actually, shares my last name. No,
not related?
No relation. Let's make that clear for so many reasons. showed up in Mar-a-Lago in the middle of the night, had a shotgun and a gas can. According to the Secret Service, he was ordered to put the gun down and the gas can down. He put the gas can down. The Secret Service said he raised the shotgun to a shooting position, and he was shot by the Secret Service, died at the scene, I believe. So, yeah, tragic story. As you said, it's not getting covered. I think there's two reasons for that. One is, again, the big headlines around the State of the Union and stuff. The second is that Trump wasn't even there. I don't know if you even call this an assassination attempt. It's not clear what the heck he was doing there. There's been some reporting the last day or two that he was really into the Epstein files, but he was also, according to social media, a Trump supporter. So there's not a simple story here, which itself probably is part of why it's not getting a lot of coverage.
If Trump was in the White House, it would have been seen as an assassination attempt, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a guy doing life in prison who went to Mar-a-Lago when Trump was there on the golf course with an AK-47. And that was a similar story. If you look at his online history, was he a Trump supporter? Why was he trying to do that? Was he just a mentally ill loner? All those sorts of things. But it's possible that the young man just didn't know Trump was there, thought he was there or whatever, or had other nefarious intentions. We don't seem to know.
See, the problem with political violence these days is that no one does it properly, is it? I mean, you take Sinn Féin in the 70s, or take your anarchists in Germany or France in the 80s, tossing bombs into cafes and, Bolsheviks storming places. Now it's a confused 20-something with a shotgun and a can of petrol wandering onto Trump's golf course. Like he'd lost his way on the way to a party or something. If Trump was there, he was the target, obviously. If he's not there, things are more complicated. But surely he could have Googled where Trump was and found out that he wasn't there.
You'd think. Yeah, for people on the right, this is going to be seen as part of a pattern.
Yeah, of course. And look, not to belittle what happened, Trump was almost assassinated already. Yep. Of course, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. His widow seems to be taking in her stride. Not stoic or anything like that, but, she's doing okay. She seems to be happy with her lot.
I'm not touching that.
Okay.
I live here. I am not going anywhere near that.
She's taking it pretty well, in fairness.
You throw your bombs from across the ocean, my friend. Enjoy. Yeah, and we have the murder of Brian Thompson, who was the chief executive officer of the largest health insurer in America. That happened in December 2024. He's not a Republican or even a politician necessarily, but that was committed by someone who was pretty avowedly left-wing and who did it to send a message. And I think for the right, these events are leading to conspiracy theories that maybe aren't quite appreciated, that they really believe that the establishment, the Democrats, whatever capitalized group you want to use there, is trying to kill Republicans and trying to kill Donald Trump or, imprison him. You can see how a Trump supporter would look at this event, the Ryan Routh attempt at Mar-a-Lago a couple years ago, the Butler assassination, as well as the criminal charges against Trump brought by the federal government and also by New York State as part of like this broad effort by the Democrats to get rid of Donald Trump and supporters like Charlie Kirk, essentially by any means necessary, right?
Yeah, of course. So again, with my hands in my pockets staring across the Atlantic Ocean, it seems like both sides treat politics like professional wrestling, The outrage is very choreographed and, a touch of blood to make it feel real. The believers say the government's out to get Trump, the deep state's out to get Trump, and the skeptics say Trump's turned the whole thing into a martyrdom roadshow, and he does that quite well, in fairness. But they're both right in a way. They're like two drunks arguing who started the bar fight. Both are kind of right.
Trump has been brilliant at it. And whatever you think about his policies, the political wherewithal to stand up with a bloody ear and yell, fight, 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 was almost superhuman. His entire life, everything that man had ever done in business and marketing and politics led up to that moment. And he knew, just the most stunningly effective thing that he could do. I wager there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who think that that's why he won the election. That event and his response.
And it turned into another massive conspiracy theory itself.
Yeah, and then you have people on the left jumping into the conspiracy theory fund saying, oh, it must have been orchestrated. Why did his ear hear so quickly and all that stuff? I'm not going to give their conspiracy theories much more credit than I do the ones on the right. But I will say, at the risk of detouring a bit, that was really the problem with the New York State charges against Trump. from a layman's perspective, they were just nonsensical. It was really a stretch, similar to what the Trump administration has done with some cases of late. And
what cases
I think
are you talking about there specifically, Vince?
there's been an attempt to prosecute Mark Kelly and other senators for releasing a video that said that soldiers don't have to obey a legal order.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's one obvious example. This idea on the right of that the Biden administration committed what they call, quote, lawfare is really colored by that state case, which was pretty much because 2 federal cases were absolutely legitimate. I mean, the classified documents one was ridiculous. There's photos of boxes in a friggin' closet at Mar-a-Lago after his lawyer has sent letters saying, oh, no, we don't have any classified records. We don't even know what you're talking about. And then the 2020 election rigging one, we've talked about that too. The special counsel there said, yeah, it was a slam dunk case. I had more than enough evidence to convict. And most of that evidence came from people in Trump's circle, came from people who were trying to execute these plans around fake electors and stuff, as we talked about before. So New York, I think, particularly for people in the middle, it really muddied the waters. To my point at the beginning, the right has now used that along with these assassination attempts and these murders to create an argument that the Democratic Party as a whole is trying to kill and silence its opponents. And there are now a lot of Republicans who legitimately, sincerely believe that that is happening. This event's not getting any coverage in the American press. It's getting a lot of coverage on the right wing. It's going to kind of cement that view. Now, I don't agree with that in large part because, as we talked about up front, I mean, this Democratic Party can't organize its response to a speech. I'm a little skeptical that they were managed to push multiple prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions.
Right, but they did manage to keep Biden's health secret for a while, didn't they? So they're capable of covering up some things.
That's true, but they f***ed that up too. So I think that proves my point a little bit, So, I mean, you can see why Trump supporters feel that way. Now, again, they don't always make the argument in good faith. We had a little interaction on our Twitter account.
I saw that.
Didn't we this week? Yeah. With someone named Blake Neff. And there was an article in the Atlantic Monthly that talked about the rising incidents of Nazi imagery on the right. And so Blake Neff quote tweeted a link to the article and argued that this was part of this Democratic plan, right? You keep demonizing people when they're called Nazis and therefore some mentally ill person or deranged leftist. And Neff is the kind of person who would say that those are synonyms, is going to go out and kill someone because the Atlantic is baselessly calling the right wing all Nazis. Now, the problem, as we pointed out on Twitter, is that Neff himself was a producer for the Tucker Carlson show when it was still on Fox News, who was fired. We can't make this up. He was fired for repeatedly and anonymously posting just virulently racist content all over social media.
Well, maybe not be the guy complaining too much about being called a Nazi.
Yeah. And the left does it too, but there's this delusion to the right wing, like when they get upset about somebody saying something offensive. Like, okay, look, you support Donald Trump. We don't have to debate over whether or not the president should be offensive or not. But if you support Donald Trump, that means you don't get to ever complain about what anybody else says. Ever. Yes. That's the deal. Okay? Otherwise, you're just a giant hypocrite. And this is the same thing. Oh my God, how could you call us Nazis? Because you posted thousands of words of Nazi for years, man. Like, let's tone down the self-righteousness.
Yes, and they'll wrap themselves in a flag of free speech by saying it also.
Of course, yeah.
And then shout down their opponents. So, I mean, landed a free home of the hypocrites.
Yeah, we're good at that.
Do you think there's some truth to that right-wing viewpoint?
Having said all that, I think there is a little bit. We are seeing more political violence, and I think it is more often directed at people on the right and or coming from people from the left. Again, I don't think it's organized. We just talked about the unknown motivations of the person down in Florida last week. The same is true of the guy who almost killed Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, who shot him in the ear. We actually still don't have a good sense of why he did that. Even that's part of right-wing conspiracy theories. They're saying, why is nobody talking about this? Why is nobody trying to figure this out? It looks like he may have just wanted to shoot someone because he searched Biden events as well, and it's possible Trump was just closer. But we don't know. There's still debates over the beliefs of the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. So, again, I don't think that the idea that, quote, capital T, capital D, the Democrats are instigating all this violence is supported. But online commentary from the left after the Charlie Kirk murder, for instance, was really nasty. You have no shortage of people who have said publicly that they wish that crooks had actually killed Trump in 2024. And I think for older supporters, probably remember the 1960s. We discussed that a little bit last episode. Political violence spiked here, and most of that was left-wing. There were bombings by a group called the Weather Underground and things like that. So as is often the case with the American right, I don't think the arguments are always made in good faith. I don't think the arguments are always well supported. I don't think the arguments are always truthful. But there's often some kind of truth at the bottom of it. And the truth is right now that the American left is maybe not necessarily committing violence. It's certainly tolerating violence and violent commentary in a way that I don't think is healthy for that side and for the country. But with all that said, let's return one more piece of news back in Ireland. I don't think we can call this undercovered. Pretty well covered over in your country, I believe.
Yes, it's very well covered in our country, in fairness. Ireland and France are going to increase security cooperation, including the sharing of intelligence. The Irish are going to buy a load of equipment off them because we don't trust to buy things off America militarily. And that's the way all of Europe is going at the moment. They're disentangling themselves from the United States militarily, financially, in any way. And they're going to purchase about €2 billion worth of equipment from France. Okay, that could have been €2 billion going to somebody in the United States, some company in the United States.
Right.
So, the United States is losing out there also. And it's going to be called the Joint Strategic Framework 2026 to 2030. And obviously they threw in economic, cultural, and all that kind of jazz. It's primarily a military deal.
This is a kind of a response to what you've talked about so many times on this podcast, the idea that Ireland needs to beef up its defense, and particularly around its Navy. It just kind of hasn't been up to where it needs to be against threats, particularly from Russia, right?
Yeah, speaking about the Navy, Ireland is going to allow the UK to patrol Irish waters. I think this is pretty humiliating as a sovereign nation, to be perfectly honest. Okay. The British are in Irish waters, patrolling our waters because we are unable to, because of years of neglect and underinvestment. As I've said before, Ireland has a ridiculous amount of mileage to cover in our maritime area. It's about 7, 8, 9 times our geographic landmass. So the British are going to come in and they said they're going to do a deal and they're going to patrol our waters. There's a lot of political language going on around it. Politicians are saying we shouldn't be afraid to seek assistance if needed from other countries. But I just wonder, how is this going to pan out in terms of, if there is an incident off the Irish coast, say down off of West Cork, whatever the case may be, the Russians are dropping anchor over subsea cables. Who's going to be in charge there?
Right.
Is it going to be London? Is it going to be Paris? Is it going to be Dublin? Do they bring the Minister for Defence on a Saturday night at 4:00 in the morning and go, the Russians are going to do something nasty, can we open fire? I'm not sure how that works legally, constitutionally, or even on a very practical political level, to be perfectly honest.
Somebody is not making that decision, and that person personally is going to be furious, and that person's country is probably going to be pretty upset too, right? If you're a Britain, and your naval destroyer is firing shots at the Russians under the command of someone else, I can't imagine that you're going to be too thrilled with that, and vice versa. If you're an Irishman, are you allowing Britain to be making that kind of call in, as you point out, what are your territorial waters?
Yeah, no, look, there's a practical and pragmatic thing going on here as well, because we're just not able to do it ourselves, okay? So the deal is France and the UK will patrol Irish waters during the EU presidency, is the long and short of it.
Okay.
But if you're looking at it from a political point of view, it's going to cause an awful lot of ructions in the next couple of months, because there's no kind of clear, maybe there is and they haven't published it, but if there was a clear framework for how this is actually going to work on a practical level, they would have told us yesterday.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah.
Ireland is coming to a very tricky time diplomatically and geopolitically now in the next 12 months, I think.
Yeah, I apologize to you and Irish listeners in advance if this sounds like a kind of a condescending question, but there is a sense, following Irish news from afar and obviously doing this podcast, that Ireland feels almost a little wobbly at the moment. I mean, you're talking about, it's a tricky time geopolitically. It's a tricky time in terms of defense. there's uncertainty around U.S. policy around big tech. There's the sense that the U.S. is no longer a valued, trusted partner more generally. Is that a fair way to put it? Ireland, maybe wobbly, not quite the right word, but a sense that things are on shaky ground right now?
There's a couple of things that have gone on in Ireland in the last couple of weeks that makes me kind of lean in towards that you might be right. The Irish government's a bit wobbly at the moment. So there was an issue with the special needs assistants. Children with special needs were going to have their special needs assistants cut from the classrooms. Of course, that caused uproar.
Right.
There's also been an issue with Board BIA, which is the Irish Food Board, essentially. And the guy in charge of it was importing Brazilian beef instead of using Irish beef. So as you can imagine, there was a conflict of interest there, and Irish farmers think this guy doesn't have his back. And politically, that's been damaging also. Now we have the French and British coming in. They're going to patrol our waters. Nobody's quite sure what's going on there. The politics around it is quite, shaky also. No, they're not telling us who's in charge if something kicks off the coast. It's a very simple answer. Who's in charge?
Yeah.
French, the British, the Irish, who knows? And now we have a visit with Trump to the White House. God only knows what Trump's going to beat us over the head with, threaten us with. And we have the EU presidency coming up, and it's going to be a perfect storm of geopolitical events. And if something goes wrong security-wise on Irish soil for the EU presidency, the blowback is going to be terrible for the government.
Yeah. Yeah, there just is so much uncertainty. Like I said, I didn't want to sound condescending asking that question because that was my sense. And it's also kind of hard to be condescending when you're American and people are looking at your country and going, it really sounds like you guys are in a civil war. Do you feel like you're in a civil war? You guys feel like you're in the middle of a civil war? Yeah, I might take wobbly right now. So
yes, wobbly over cold civil war.
Yeah, any day of the week. So on yet another joyful note, we tried to keep it a little later this time. I think we did a good job. But we are going to wrap up here. But yeah, Tull, as always, a great episode. We've got more coming on Tuesday, right? Got a fun topic, I think.
Yes, we're going to talk about crypto and the stock market and how the stock market's not so massive a thing in Ireland, despite all our pensions being invested in.
Yeah, that'd be a very interesting angle to take. Yeah, the crypto will be a lot of fun discussion. I'm very curious to see kind of how the Irish and Europeans view that trend. As always, check out our archives, new listeners. We've got some evergreen episodes in there we think you'll like. Follow us on Substack at atlanticcurrent.substack.com for show notes, including our notes here. Other than that, I think it's time to go, right, Tull?
Rightio, Vince. Stock market, Wolf of Wall Street, Wolf of West Cork, that's what they call me. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.